don't know what compelled me to rip up the old linoleum in the kitchen. Maybe it was the uneven patches or the way it lifted at the edges. The rest of the house was vintage Victorian charm, but the kitchen felt like it belonged in a different era, an era that didn't quite fit. My wife, Jenna, had been asking me to do something about it for months, so I finally gathered the tools and went at it one Saturday morning. Our house was a big one with high ceilings, ornate molding, and wide hallways. It creaked and groaned as if it had a life of its own. I often joked that we were just tenants in a house that had been alive for decades, watching families come and go. But when I started tearing up the kitchen floor, I discovered something that changed everything. Underneath a particularly stubborn section of linoleum, over in an out-of-the-way corner, I found a trapdoor. It was old, wooden, and covered in layers of grime and paint. I figured it was just an access point to the crawl space, the kind you'd expect in a house this old. I was curious, though, so I popped it open. A gust of musty air hit me in the face, and I saw a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. It was unusual, but I assumed it was just part of the house's old structure. I thought about going down, but the darkness and the smell of mildew made me hesitate. I decided to leave it for later and closed the trapdoor. The next week, our kids, Tommy and Lila, started talking about their new friend. They were 7 and 9, full of energy and curiosity, always running through the house like there was no limit to their energy. They loved making up stories about knights and dragons, so I figured this new friend was just another one of their make-believe characters. "Dad, we have a new friend," Lila said at breakfast, her eyes wide with excitement. "Yeah, she's really nice," Tommy added. "Her name is Margaret." "Margaret, huh?" I replied, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "And where did you meet this Margaret?" "In the kitchen," Lila said, pointing toward the doorway. "She mostly only comes out at night. She seems sad, but she's really friendly." Jenna and I exchanged glances. It was cute, but we didn't think much of it. Kids make up imaginary friends all the time. It wasn't until a few days later that things started to get weird. It was a Thursday night, and Jenna and I were watching TV after putting the kids to bed. The house was quiet, the usual creaks and groans blending into the background. Then we heard a noise in the kitchen, like a soft scraping sound. We paused the TV, listening, but it stopped as quickly as it had started. "Did you hear that?" Jenna asked, her eyes narrowing with concern. "Yeah," I replied, trying to sound casual. "It's probably just the wind." But the noise continued, coming in short bursts, like something was being dragged across the floor. It was faint, almost inaudible, but it was enough to make us uneasy. I got up to check, but when I entered the kitchen, there was nothing out of place. No one was there, and the windows were shut tight. A few days later, Jenna mentioned that one of our small wooden figurines, one that usually sat on the mantel, was missing. We searched for a while, but it was nowhere to be found. Jenna asked the kids if they'd seen it, and they shook their heads. The next day at breakfast, the kids mentioned the figurine and told us matter-of-factly that it was in the attic on an old brown trunk. Jenna and I exchanged glances. Playing along with the kids, I said, "Oh, good. I'll go get it after breakfast." After breakfast, I went upstairs. Our house had one of those pull-down ceiling staircases for attic access. I noticed how high up the string was. I had to stretch to reach it. It dawned on me that the kids would never have been able to reach it. I climbed up a few steps, just enough to look around. Sure enough, the little figurine was sitting prominently on an old brown trunk, exactly as described. I was about to fully climb into the attic and go get the figurine when I noticed something that sent chills down my spine. There was a layer of dust on the attic floor so thick that I could tell nothing had disturbed it for years. No footprints, no scuff marks. There was literally no way the kids could have placed the figurine over on that trunk without leaving traces in all the dust. When I came downstairs with the figurine, I looked at the kids and asked, "How did you know where this was?" "Margaret knew where it was," Tommy said. "She told us." "Margaret told you?" I asked, feeling a strange chill down my spine. "Yeah, she's really smart," Lila replied. "She knows where everything is. We didn't know then that it was just the beginning. As the days passed, more strange things started happening. We heard whispering at night, soft voices that seemed to come from the walls. Sometimes, when I walked down the hallway, I swore I saw a shadow darting into one of the rooms. Jenna noticed it too, but we didn't want to scare the kids, so we kept it to ourselves. One evening, I came home from work to find Jenna sitting at the kitchen table, a worried look on her face. "What's wrong?" I asked, pulling up a chair. "The kids," she said, her voice low. "They've been talking about Margaret again. They say she's getting braver, that she's not hiding as much anymore." "What does that mean?" I asked, feeling that same chill from before. "They say she visits them at night," Jenna replied. "They talk to her, but they get quiet when I ask about it. I think she's starting to scare them." It was unsettling, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to make a big deal out of an imaginary friend, but the noises and shadows were becoming too much to ignore. The final straw came one night when Jenna saw something in the kitchen that left her shaken. It was late, and the kids were asleep. Jenna was in the kitchen, getting a glass of water, and she saw a shadowy figure standing by the trapdoor. It was small, like a child, but it moved quickly, disappearing before she could get a good look. Jenna ran to our bedroom, her face pale with fear. "I saw her," she said, her voice trembling. "Margaret. She was in the kitchen by the trapdoor." I tried to calm her down, but the truth was I was just as scared. I knew I had to do something, so I decided to check the crawl space. Maybe I'd be able to find an answer for whatever was causing all the commotion. I grabbed a flashlight and a crowbar and headed into the kitchen. The trapdoor was still shut, but I could feel a cold draft coming from the edges. I pulled it open and descended the narrow staircase, the air growing colder as I went down. The space was cramped and filled with cobwebs, the kind of place you wouldn't want to spend more time in than necessary. But I needed answers. I shined my flashlight around and saw a small door at the far end. It was old and rotting, barely hanging on its hinges. When I opened it, a blast of musty air hit me, and I saw something that made my blood run cold. On the other side of that door was a small room with barely enough space for a single bed. Chains hung from the walls, with restraints still attached. The bed was rotting, the mattress covered in dust and cobwebs. But the worst part was in the corner, half buried in dirt and debris. A human skeleton, small and fragile. I backed out of the room, my heart racing, and ran back up the stairs. I slammed the trapdoor shut, as if that would change anything. Jenna and I called the authorities, who came to investigate. They determined that the skeleton was likely the remains of a young girl, missing since the early 1900s. They speculated that she might have been held captive in that hidden room, a grim secret hidden beneath our kitchen. When they told us the girl's name, my blood turned to ice. Margaret McAlister. It was the same name our kids had been using for their imaginary friend. Jenna and I were both completely freaked out at this point, and we decided to move away shortly after. We couldn't stay in a house with that kind of history, not with our kids. After we moved away, the kids never mentioned Margaret again, and life slowly returned to normal. But I couldn't help but wonder about the girl we found beneath the trapdoor. Was she really the same Margaret who visited our kids at night? And if so, what did she want from us? Some mysteries are better left unsolved, and some stories are better left untold. But every now and then, when I hear a faint whisper or see a fleeting shadow, I remember Margaret McAlister and the terrible secret hidden beneath our old house. And I know that some things, once found, can never truly be forgotten.